Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome. You've been noticed this meeting is being electronically recorded. I'd like to start out tonight with a moment of silence for Marilyn Rigby, a senior clerk typist for 33 years from 1968 to 2001 for the Attleboro Public Schools. Thank you. And our thoughts are with you. First thing on our agenda is a community update, school-sponsored events. Keith Drucker, our student representative. Keith.
District-wide, September the 27th, the ELL Parent Night at Wamsutta will be at 6:30 p.m. October 3rd, there will be an early release day and no morning or afternoon preschool. October 10th, the middle school afternoon parent-teacher conferences will be held from 3 to 5 p.m. October 11th, the middle school evening parent-teacher conferences will be held from 6 to 8 p.m. At Attleboro High School, on October 2nd, senior parent night will be held at 6 p.m. in the Bray Auditorium. On October 3rd, and this is not a part of the presentation, but former NBA and Durfee High School basketball player Chris Herron will be at Attleboro High School on the 3rd at 9 a.m. to speak to the student body about the dangers of alcohol and substance abuse. Chris is a prolific speaker and sends a powerful message to the students based on his personal experience. Should I read the whole thing? We would like to extend an invitation to the members of the school committee to join us and listen to this very important presentation. Please confirm your attendance before September 27th, 2012 to Mr. Leo Johnson at his email address. The event will be held in the auditorium. Thank you, Leo Johnson, Chairman, Attleboro Recreation Commission.
Thank you.
Moving on. On October the 6th, the SAT exam will be administered at Attleboro High School. Students should arrive at 7:30 a.m. At the middle schools, at Brennan, September 28th, the instrument rental night will be held at 6 p.m. in the cafeteria. And on October 9th, the PTO meeting will be held at 6:30 p.m. in the library. At Coelho, on October 2nd, will be picture day. And October 17th will be the PTO meeting, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. At Wamsutta, on October 4th, will be picture day. Finally, at the elementary schools, September 28th at Hill Roberts will be picture day. At Hyman Fine, September 26th will be their PTO meeting, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. in the library. At Studley, on October 4th, their school council meeting will be held at 5:30 p.m. And also on October 4th, the PTO meeting will be held at 6:30 p.m. Thatcher, on October the 11th, their PTO meeting will be held at 7 p.m. And on October 12th will be picture day. At Willett, on October 13th, their PTO meeting will be held at 7 p.m. in the library.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, next, we have approval of minutes from September 10th, 2012.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion
Abstain.
passes.
Doesn't hear abstain.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Okay, moving on to open forum. Open forum. This is a time when members of the public may address the school committee. Open forum is not a time for the committee members to engage in dialogue with members of the public. Guidelines for open forum are available to you at the podium. Please know that we are interested in what you have to say, or we cannot respond without background information on your issues. Please come forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. No one wishes to speak in open. Yeah. Moving on to a consent agenda. We have a vote to accept a donation in the amount of $413.30 to the Hill Roberts Gifts donations line from the Target's Take Charge of Education program.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We will vote to accept the donation in the amount of $355.69 to the Brennan Middle School Gifts donation line from the Target's Take Charge of Education program.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We will vote to accept a donation in the amount of $205.48 to the Coelho Middle School Gifts donations line from the Target's Take Charge of Education program.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. We have a vote to accept a donation in the amount of $1,044.35 to the Attleboro High School Gifts donations line from the Target's Take Charge of Education program.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Lastly, we have a vote to accept the donation of the Epson 7000 wide format printer with an estimated value of $2,500 and 4 3-door file cabinets of value to be determined to Attleboro High School from Joseph Bobola, owner of OPS Printing located in North Attleboro.
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to new business. Tonight we have a very special presentation from the Attleboro Special Education Parent Advisory Council. It'll be held by Ms. Lori Scares, the chairperson, and by Marisa McCarthy, Special Education. And Lori, if you could come forward and introduce us all to the rest of your team with you.
I'm gonna have, if you don't mind, the whole board's gonna come up. We're all taking part. Please just bring you everyone. Oh,
Do I come from behind or? Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you.
Is there any more, Mr. Norbert, for the administration?
No, we didn't actually produce that.
Okay. Could you send us 4 copies so we can have them at the central administration? Thank you. No, it's okay. No, fine. I'll get another copy. This one I have all the information. Thank you, Mr. Love. Mr. Chairman, if I may, could I ask you to start? Would it be, I know we have, some of us have this material, and then we can catch up with the public, if that's okay with the committee.
absolutely.
I just hate for our guests to be waiting.
all right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Durkin. Mr. Chairman, School Committee, thank you for giving us this opportunity to present tonight. Our goal for the presentation is so that you and the community have a better understanding of who we are and what we do. We are best known by our acronym ASEPAC. I am Lori Scales, the ASEPAC chair. I've lived in Attleboro for 22 years and have 2 children, one who has already graduated and one who receives special education services in a self-contained classroom. And I have been involved with the ASEPAC since 2002. I'm going to ask the other board members to introduce themselves.
I'm Susan A. Carroll, and I am the PR coordinator for the ASEPAC. I've lived in Attleboro for 12 years, and I have 1 son in special education in an elementary school. And I've been involved with the ASEPAC for 4 years.
Hi, I'm Maureen Cronin. I've lived in Attleboro for about 40 years. I have 3 children, 2 who are adult and have graduated. They actually live in New Hampshire, but they were in special education in local schools. I also have a young teen son who is in one of the public schools and receives special education services. I've been with ASEPAC, this is actually just my first year, and I'm the secretary for them.
I'm Angela Ferreira. I'm the workshop coordinator for the group. I have 3 children. I've lived in Attleboro for 14 years now. I have 2 children in special education and a typical daughter in the high school as well.
I'm David Nierenberg. I'm the treasurer of the ASEPAC. I've lived in Attleboro for 11 years, and I have 2 children in the public school system, one of whom is in a special education setting.
Hi, I'm Michelle Brouillard. I've lived in Attleboro for 15 years. I have 2 children, and I have 1 child who receives special education services at the elementary level.
Welcome to Ollie.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, what is a PAC? PAC is a Parent Advisory Council that is required by state law. The ASEPAC is here to ensure that the educational system works for all students. Our main objective is to provide support to parents and promote awareness regarding special education services. Currently, there are 1,080 students on IEPs, 781 are in an inclusive classroom, and 299 are in substantially separate placements. This represents 17% of the student population in Attleboro. Sorry.
As required by law, the ASEPAC advises the school committee and administration to help understand the parents' perceptions of what areas of special education are working and what needs improvement. We meet regularly with the special education director to discuss the areas that may need improvement and also any parent concerns that have been brought to the PAC. This communication is important in maintaining special education law, and it also improves outcomes for students receiving special education services. The administration has been very supportive by providing assistance to the ASEPAC when requested. Massachusetts law requires that the PAC provide a basic rights workshop annually. A paid membership to Mass PAC enables us to fulfill this requirement. We are hosting a basic rights workshop in October this year. We rely on the Federation of Children with Special Needs to provide a presenter for this workshop, and they in turn provide us with presentation materials for copying and distributing at the meeting. We also do a survey at the end of their presentation to evaluate their effectiveness, and we send these results to the Federation.
I think, as you've heard, we're a group of parents, and our children receive special education support in the Attleboro Public Schools. In October of 2010, the ASEPAC was reestablished after a period of inactivity. Since 2010, the PAC has reorganized, and we've become an active member of the special education community in Attleboro. Our mission statement is to facilitate understanding, respect, and support for all children with special education needs in our community. The ASEPAC provides support for parents, educators, administrators, and all members in our community. As parents of students with special education needs, we have a wealth of personal knowledge and resources that can benefit many by simply just sharing our experiences and our ideas. Our executive board has a wide range of experience with various disabilities. Our children participate in inclusive classrooms, as well as substantially separate programs in the district. Our board has students at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. Our general membership shall be open to any resident of Attleboro or person affiliated with the Attleboro Public Schools who has attended at least one meeting of the ASEPAC during the past 12 months.
We are a resource within the Attleboro School District for parents and staff. We share information with PAC members at our meetings and through an email listserv. You can subscribe to our listserv by sending a request to our email addresses asepac@ymail.com. The emails give details about other area PAC meetings, special needs events and activities in our community, and other important resources related to special needs parenting. School personnel that attend our workshops can receive certificates of attendance by request. This is a list of our schedule from last year. We offered different informational workshops and presentations each year based on feedback that we get. Our meetings are subject to the open meeting laws, and we often have parents and staff from other communities attending. To help participation for all families to attend, we now offer childcare at our meetings. We're always working to increase awareness of the PAC so that families with students receiving special education services know that we're an available resource. We have a great schedule of events for this school year. In addition to informational presentations, we're trying to incorporate some family fun, such as the winter dance that we're having in February. And we're offering a humorous presentation in March that is a great event for any parent, not just parents of children with special needs. The Therapy Insanity would be applicable to any parent. All of our events are scheduled for the third Thursday of every month, and most of them are held at Brennan Middle School in the library.
For this year, we've set a few goals for ourselves. Our goals are aimed at adding the greatest value we can to the district and to the students who receive special education services in Attleboro. Obtaining membership in MASPAC, which is the statewide association of PACs, would provide us with access to additional resources for the families who we try to serve. Many of our other goals are related to increasing our visibility in the community. Related to that goal of increasing our visibility and collaborating with other community organizations, we're pleased that our March event that was just referred to is going to be hosted at the Attleboro Public Library. We'd also like to note, in mentioning the library, that they have some excellent publications regarding special needs that are available to families in Attleboro. In addition, we feel it's important for the ASEPAC, given its experience, to have a presence on any search committee for a special education director and for participating in the state's mid-cycle review of the district. Last year, as was mentioned, the ASEPAC board started meeting monthly with the special education director, and we look forward to continuing these meetings this year. We're also pleased that we'll be collaborating with Norton's PAC on our next program, which was referenced, the Basic Rights Workshop, which, to give the specifics about that event, will be on October 18th at 7 p.m. in the Brennan Middle School Library. We also look forward to reporting back to the school committee in the future on the successes of the special education program and any areas that may need improvement.
Moving forward, here are some of our recommendations for the district. Awareness of who we are and what we do is vital to the special education community in Attleboro and will lead to better working relationships between parents of students receiving special education services and the school administration. We need support throughout the school district to inform parents of ASEPAC. Families need to know who we are and how we can help support them. All of the schools has a supply of our brochures, and we would appreciate them sharing them with the families. Based on our experiences with our children and their disabilities, as well as other parents' experiences, we feel that we can provide valuable input for administration and staff on special needs areas that need more training through professional development. Also, as parents, we are emotionally vested in the outcome of IEP meetings. We feel that by collaborating with the staff, we can provide a quick do's and don'ts list which can aid the staff on how to address the needs of families. We will be working closely with Marisa McCarthy to identify areas of improvement for the district with regard to assistive technology and how we can better support and improve education for students with special needs. We feel there's great room for improvement in this area.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share with you more about who we are and what we do. With over 1,000 students receiving special education support in Attleboro, not everything is going to be perfect. If a family contacts you with questions, please refer them to us so that we can support them in working with the schools. Thank you for your time and attention this evening, and we are available for any questions.
Question? Ken?
Just to clarify, the ASEPAC is open to anyone. You don't have to have kids who are of age to even be in our school system.
Yep.
Now, Ms. Scales, the best way to reach you is through the email, the asepac@ymail.com.
Correct, or our phone number here at the high school is 222-0012, and we're extension 444.
But any parent can also stop by a school or in the central office here to pick the brochure.
Brochure, yep, and I have
Okay.
some available. There should be one in everybody's packet too.
Yep, just so the parents at home know they have many ways to get in contact with you. And I know you have a website as well, so.
Well, we're working on that.
So if you Google ASEPAC, you'll find them, so.
Mine is more of a comment. I am on the email list, and I want to thank you all for the information that you provide. There is so much out there that I think any parent with a special education child should sign up for that, because it's been very helpful to me. And like I said, all the work that you put into it, I thank you very much, because it's been so helpful to me, and I know other parents also. Thank you.
Chris?
Could you just describe to me what you mean by assistive technology?
Sure. Really, it's anything that's going to help a child succeed. Marisa, do you want to just?
Sure. Assistive technology can come in many different manners. It can help a student who may not be able to communicate. It could be a technology that way. It could be a writing tool of some sort. So it's any sort of technology that helps a student communicate or be able to access the curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll add my thanks to all the work that you do throughout the district and for the families of the district. I know on the recommendation slides, it seemed as though one of the principal objectives is to try to help promote the group more. I assume that's just sort of increased communication and finding ways to make sure that parents know that this group is out there and that you're an available resource. Are there any other specifics? I know they're touched upon here a little bit that we should keep in mind in terms of improving your ability to get the message out, one. And two, are there any specific recruitment efforts underway, particularly in the earlier grades? I know you talked about how the group was sort of reestablished in October 2010, and that's the district's responsibility, but I would imagine having parents and families who are involved from the early stages of their school district experience might be helpful with regard to that. Does anyone have any?
Well, the way we reach out is through, well, we're finally getting on the announcements here, which is great. We're hopefully getting out on some of the newsletters that go to all the, that come from the schools. And we do flyers for each month when we do our presentation. And those mostly go to self-contained classrooms due to some, confidentiality issues. Right. So we're reaching a lot of people. We could reach a lot more, and hopefully with the website, we'll be able to reach
Right.
out even more.
And the only thing I would add is if the administration in the months ahead, I know the ASEPAC will be back and to keep us informed, but if Mr. Sawyer and Dr. Durkin, if you could just keep us informed as to if there's any other sort of collaboration that the district is able to engage in terms of helping to promote the group's activities, I think that would be helpful.
I was going to just add that those flyers will be given out at IEP meetings. They generally are, but at times I don't think we've been as diligent as we should. And every parent who is at an IEP meeting, whether their child is determined to have a disability or not, it's very important they have that information. Because many times, I do have to say on a personal note, in my years here, I have referred families to Lori and other members of the group up here, and they have done a huge job in helping that family help understand. And if I as a superintendent could do that outreach, I think we as the rest of our staff, administrators, teachers, could do more. So I want to personally thank you for all your hard work and for keeping special education in the forefront of what we need to do. I have said repeatedly that if we do well by our children with disabilities, we will have a superb school district, because that in itself tells us who we are and what we are, what's important. So I thank you for all your hard work, because I know it's many hours, and at times it's holding parents' hands. It's also helping parents have another set of ears and eyes, and to also give us feedback when we could be doing it better, particularly in communication at team meetings. So you have my commitment for that, and I know you have Ms. McCarthy's, and I want to thank you for that. So we will be on the charge of doing what needs to get done to spread the word more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, 2012 Achievement Data by Dr. Durkin, the Superintendent of the Schools, our Assistant Superintendent of the Schools, David Sawyer, and Ms. Michelle Roy, the Data and Accountability Coordinator.
We have it? Thank you, Ms. Rowe. I'm delighted tonight to present to the committee and the community our results and accountability determinations. And delighted may seem like a strong word, but I think it's an extremely important part of the work we do. And the community not only deserves but should demand exactly what our work has entailed. I will say to you, we happen to have some good news. But when we say good news, that does not at all overshadow, we have some real challenges ahead. And it is a time when we look at a new accountability system and what we can share, but at the same time, you will hear by the end of the presentation how very challenging it is to keep this pace up, and what this district has accomplished will hopefully continue to accomplish. But as a district, we are one of continuous improvement. That starts with me and every member of my staff. We're always trying to get better. So in so many words, it's nice to have good news, but we're never done. So we are going to share our progress, and we're going to talk about what how we got here and what some things we need to do better, and look at our next steps. This presentation, as the chairman stated, is going to be shared by Mr. Sawyer and Ms. Roy, who is our Data Accountability Coordinator, who, just so I can describe her role, she was a teacher and also an administrator, but has incredible patience in sifting through, how should I say, a table full of data and making it succinct enough to help the principals and the teachers understand it and then act on it. Data is only good if it can be used. First, you have to understand it, and I do have to say, the last few months we have been given some real challenges from the DESE to understand the data and the volume we're getting, but we have risen to the challenge. So that's not something that we take lightly. So I'm going to start with, briefly, this is all students, and I had done a little bit of this in the email that I had forwarded to the committee. When you look at this, of course, blue is Attleboro, and you can see that we started behind the state, and the reason why 2008, it's 5 years, and we can look at that. But, and you might say, which I would hope you would not, that, gee, it's only a 1-point difference going up in English language arts, and only 3% different, and that means 72% of our children in Attleboro are scoring at advanced or proficient. We put those two categories together. I'm going to use an analogy here about the 1-point difference. As we get higher up on the trajectory, it becomes very challenging. It's a lot different than when you're in the 50s and 60s. I can only give an analogy that's close to my heart. On a diet, got to lose 100 pounds. The first 10 come off pretty easy. The next 10, maybe not so easy. The last 10 are a killer. And because you're losing only about a half a pound with that. I hope I didn't insult anyone by that analogy, but I put myself in that as a constant person who has to, because I love to eat. But anyway, what I'm saying is, so when you move up 1 percentage point, which we're delighted that we did in English language arts, it's a lot of work. And it's not so simple when you take in all students to be able to do that. I say that so we can appreciate how we have to keep increasing. As you can see, we had a big bump up in 2009, another big bump up in 2010, and now we're at 2, and now we're at 1. And the state, we started behind the state. So you might say in some of the data we're going to show you, gee, that's great progress. Remember, we started back. So we have to accelerate our progress. In math, we're very pleased that we're also above the state by about, the state is at 59%, we're at 65%. And again, you can see we started at 52%. So we've made 13 percentage points more of students who are achieving in the advanced and proficient stage. I want to just explain something too. Why do we compare ourselves to the state? Well, if I just said to you we're at 65% advanced and proficient, most likely the community and the committee would say to me, well, what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? It's a barometer, and it is the lowest minimum threshold. By no means are we saying we should be celebrating at 65%. In some ways we are, but we're also saying that we have to compare ourselves. So when you take all the students across the state, we need to be minimally at least as good, or if not better, than the average across the state. And I'm pleased to show that for all students we have here. This gives you a picture of our students scoring this year. We're going to talk about how they've scored over past years. You could see that we all told, as showed before, 72% in the advanced and proficient stage. 3rd grade, we're not happy we went down. Yes, we're above the state. We're not sure what happened there. I will show you also in math a more dramatic drop. The issue for that is we are looking at that very carefully. We believe the new Common Core standards are kicking in. We also believe the format of the test has changed, and it looks different. You have 8-year-olds who never took a test before. We need to prepare our kids somewhat better when they're faced with possibly a math example that might look different, or a type of reading exercise that may involve more inferential comprehension, reading between the lines than reading the lines. So those are one issues. When we look at grade 5, you can see that we didn't make any progress, but again, the state went down. When we look at grade 6, we're not happy with going down, but somehow we're getting more information about what happened at that 6th grade test across the state. And as you can see, we're very pleased looking at grade 8 as children accelerate in terms of what we're doing. When we look at math, as I said before, grade 3 represents a real change for us, and one that we need to look at. Again, we're above the state went down, but at the same token, we're looking at this much deeper, and Michelle will talk about how when we look at types of questions that were offered, and we have our coordinators here tonight, Linda Ferreira and Lori Regan, as well as our coaches are watching, as well as all our principals looking at where the decreases and increases occurred. You can see that in 6th grade too, we're looking very carefully. Though we're 8 percentage points above the state, we did drop too. 8th grade, watch out, Mr. Rooney, they're coming for pre-calculus. I mean, they are really booming. And again, looking at the accelerating, we're wondering, did we form the foundation in 7th grade that allowed the kids to do so well in 8th grade? And we are clearly far above the state in that area. So, for every grade level except grade 10, which we're 1 percentage point, we are above the state. And that is good news. In our science and technology, you can see that we have made some considerable progress, going up 12 percentage points in grade 5, and there was some specific strategies that we did in grade 5 at the middle school. Remember, science in grade 5 takes in all of science from grade 1 through 5. So those 5th grade teachers have some real challenges in a cumulative effect of looking at the concepts that are grade 5 that are recycled from grade 1 through 4. We need to do a better job of concretizing that, but we're pleased that we went up as much as we did. In grade 8, same scenario. Again, there are three grades in between, 6, 7, and 8, and in the high school, we're also making changes. So though we're below the state in 2 grades, we're glad that we were able to make that percentage increase. I'm going to have Mr. Sawyer go through our growth percentile and explain that. As you can see, what is important about this is, for me, the growth percentile, and I will say for my administrators, really shows, have our children learned over a year? What they came in with, are they learning in making high growth, accelerating growth over a year, or is it typical, or is it low? Obviously, every parent wants their child to make minimally 1 year's progress because they're in school for a year, whether your child has a disability, doesn't speak English, or they are in more of the typical range. So,
one of the pitfalls of achievement data is that we're often comparing 2 different groups of students. So when we look at this year's data compared to last year's data, if we're looking at, say, like grade 10 or grade 3 or whatever it is, we're comparing 2 different groups of students. And there are lots of problems associated with comparing different groups of students in terms of what's really the story here. So the state has created the growth percentile as a way of trying to compare apples to apples. And what the growth measure does is it takes students and it creates groups of what they call academic peers. So all the kids who have the exact same score history, that is the same scores going back on previous tests, they grouped them together in one group, and then they put them all in a line from the lowest score to the highest score and create a percentile ranking where 50 would be the average score for them. And students are then put along that line to create this number. Now 50 would be the median. This is the number that we would call typical growth. In the statistics behind the growth measure, 10 points is not, anything less than 10 points is not statistically significant. So that's why typical growth is considered 40 to 60, because that's 10 points on either side of 50, the average student. This is very helpful because then you can look at students and compare them to other students like that student. And schools are given their SGP ranking as the median for that school. So all the kids get an SGP number, and then the school's SGP number is the median number for all the students in that school. So you can also do that for a district across an entire grade. And so the good news here is that there are no low growth grades for the Attleboro Public Schools. We are seeing typical or high growth across the district.
There is no growth for grade 3 because obviously students don't have a year to look back on.
No
in
score
grade
history.
4, there's no scores with that.
All right, so when you take growth, which is scored, again, from roughly from 0 to 100, and then you take achievement, percent of students scoring proficient or advanced, again, that's for percentile, so that's 0 to 100. You can chart our results on a quadrant, and in this graph, what you're really looking for is high growth, high achievement. That means that not only are your students scoring well, but they're growing at a high rate. So the northeast, the top right quadrant, that's where we want to be. The last place you would want to be is in the southwest.
So Arizona's out. We don't want that. And Florida's not so great either. Okay. And Seattle, we definitely don't want to be in the north. So I don't mean to make fun of cities, but it does help to organize it a little bit.
So what we're looking for in this chart is to see high growth, high achievement, top right quadrant. That's the promised land. And what we have charted on this graph is the comparable districts as defined by the DART last year. Now the DART isn't available for the 2012 data yet, But what we can do is, because the district data is now available statewide, we've gone in and looked at those other communities and plotted their district scores against our own, just to give you an idea of how does Attleboro's performance look when compared to like districts. And that like districts is as determined by the state. They're telling us these are the communities that are like Attleboro. And you can see us right up there. We are high, so we're in the top half, which we want to be. And we are just on the edge of the middle line there. We have a 49 SGP for ELA. 50 would be the midline. So we're just off of being in that top right quadrant where we want to be. And you'll also notice that compared to other districts, we're doing pretty well. And math, it's even better news. We are clearly in the top right quadrant. We're the highest achieving district of the comparable districts, and we are leading towards the right in SGP. Another way to look at the results is to take a group of students and look at how they've been doing over time. So we refer to a group of students who stay with us as a cohort. And here we have the grade 10 from 2012. So these guys are juniors this year. And when we look back and chart their results all the way back from 5th grade, what we see is a very definite trend of an increase in the number of students scoring advanced and proficient, and a decrease in the number of students achieving needs improvement or warning failing. So this is one group of students and their results on each of these tests, and as you see over time, we're moving them up into proficient and advanced out of needs improvement and warning. This was ELA, and it's a similar story in math.
Any questions? Please stop us.
Ken?
Going back to the data when we're dropping in 3rd grade and 6th grade, do we have an isolation of what schools imitate Red Dragon? That or?
That is district data, so that's across the district. However, we have extremely promising information in some schools and some where there are drops. So all the data that we're showing you tonight is available by school. So as much, how should I say, dissecting we're doing by the district, it really is drilling down by school, by grade. And that data is being looked at very carefully in schools where we did well and where we did not perform as well. And we're also being able to match across schools how come one school did better, which may have had more of a low-income population or more needs with ELL, but another school did not. So we have that same information by school, and that takes place at grade level meetings, data meetings, coaches meetings, through all that. Across the board, I would not say it was 6th grade across in every school. Would you say, Michelle, that was an issue? Not necessarily.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, okay.
But I know for grade 3, it was in a couple of
Grade
schools.
3 was fairly pervasive. And not to say that we look to others, but I've had several superintendent meetings, and the point of discussion has been what happened to grade 3. So you can see across the state something happened, and we're taking that apart as districts, so there seems to have been an issue. Now, we don't blame the test, and I don't want to appear on blaming the test, but if they've changed the format and upped the ante, that can make a large difference with children who have never sat before with a test. So we need to look at that, dissect it, and then figure it out what we need to do better to prepare our kids. This information shows the 5-year trends, and the next 2 slides are very powerful because they represent what we call sustainability, and they represent a systemic change that has occurred in Attleboro. In deference to Mr. Parent's question, what this shows is all grades over the periods of 5 years have made significant gains in the number of children in advanced and proficient, regardless of the school, regardless of, gee, maybe 2009 had some great kids, or maybe Miss So-and-so was a terrific principal. What this shows is that across the board, systemically, Attleboro is making strides. Now you look at what this represents, just so you have an idea in numbers. In 2012, 4,722 Attleboro students scored a proficient or higher in ELA, and about 3,857 kids in math. As compared to 2008, where there was 619 kids less scoring in ELA and 743 less in math. If you divide that up by 5, you can say that on an average, every year, 123 more kids got better in ELA and 150 more got better in math. That's the momentum that's extremely important to recognize and to validate, that this is not just about one grade. It's not just about one school. It's not about, oh, they've got the, the more higher achieving kids or this. It's about a system change that is a wave of extreme amount of achievement and momentum. It also shows that it can be sustained. So when you look at ELA, you can see the state has changed 13% in grade 10, and we're up 15%. Dramatically when we look at 4th grade. Why has this happened? A lot of it has to do with our teacher practice. In fact, practically all of it has to do how we have reinvented ourselves to look at student achievement and look at why students are achieving and why they're not, and what do we need to change within ourselves to make every child learn. So you can see all 7 grade levels were outpacing the state in ELA, and the same in math. In math, somewhat even more dramatically, except for grade 3, it's in double digits. Now, part of this is we're doing very well, but I also want to caution you, we did start very far behind. So what the other part about this that makes this a very important story is that we're accelerating. So if a child is behind, or the city is behind, or the district is behind, we need to do things that work well, provide leverage, and catch us up. So we're not lagging behind. So this is an extremely good news part in terms of what it says about the district change and about the journey toward excellence as an all kids, all grades, all school agenda, pre-K through 12. I know that was my soapbox, but it's an important one. Michelle is going to go over the accountability system and how these numbers come about. I just want to lead into, there's new acronyms. The big picture about this, and I've been asked this several times, it is a better accountability system for a couple of reasons. And one is which it allows for growth. And if you're in public education, that's why we're in public education, because we make differences in children's lives. We get children who may not have been in school before, who have disabilities, who don't speak English, and we help them achieve. And they grow just as much as their non-disabled peers or as their neighbors who speak English and have lived here all their lives. That's what the beauty of public education is. That's the excitement. And we take kids who are achieving okay, and we push them to achieve more, and to be able to do more in their high school and have opportunities that they never thought they would have, either in high school and well beyond, technical school, college, etc. So it does allow for growth. It also does count in all kids. And Michelle is going to go over that without penalizing subgroups against one another. So she is going to describe this, and she's a master at explaining it simply. We have 2 slides on this. The DSC sent us 40, and she's got it down to a pretty good system here. Am I right?
For those of you who remember, we used to have adequate yearly progress, which was a measure of what was called CPI, the Composite Performance Index, which was simply we got points for where students scored, and then they gave us an average based on that. And it was only based on students that were advanced, proficient, needs improvement in morning. We never really got any data on whether those students were growing compared to students like them. States started to slowly roll out that growth factor in the last couple of years. So what they've done as part of the No Child Left Behind waiver is they proposed this new system, which takes into account what you've heard probably in the paper, what's called narrowing the proficiency gap, which is strictly, again, just that CPI piece and how we're getting, cutting our gap between where we are and 100 in half by 2017. It blends in the growth data, which we've talked a little bit about, in only ELA and math. We don't have growth data in science, but it did add science into the CPI piece, the Composite Performance Index, which we hadn't had before. It was strictly ELA and math. So science is a blend, but only of the gap narrowing piece, not the growth. And it also adds 2 other indicators for the high school for graduation rates and dropouts. So it blends anywhere from 4 to 5 to 7 of those together into a single number for an annual score and into a cumulative number for 4 years. And we get information on how we're doing based on a target that they've set for us. So how do they do this? So number one, what I talked about is we have to take the proficiency gap, which is strictly that CPI. Again, each student gets a number based on if they scored advanced or proficient, high, needs improvement, low, and so on. Average that up. We have to cut for everybody, all of our students and each of the groups of students. The distance from where they were in 2011 to 2017, we have to cut our distance to 100 in half for each of those subgroups by then. So we take that number, the distance from where we are to 100, cut it in half, and then divide it up in 6 years. Because from 2011 to 2017, there's 6 intervals. We no longer have the old terms restructuring, schools in needs of improvement. They've replaced that with their assistance levels, which they had a little bit of in the past, but they're entirely focused on the assistance levels 1 through 5. And we'll get into a little bit of that in a little bit. They added a high needs subgroup. We had a lot of schools across the state who didn't have a large enough group in some of the categories, like ELL or special ed or some of their racial groups, to qualify for any sort of information from the state. So they created a new kind of super subgroup, which includes low income, special education, and ELL. And they lowered the subgroup minimum from 40 to 30. And in doing that across the state, they scooped up another about 262 schools who now get ratings in these areas. So
Just
schools,
as we have.
So schools in the past who didn't get any information now all of a sudden have all of this information for the past 4 years. We were lucky enough to have this information so we could, take a look at interventions that were working. In order to do that for these other systems, they would have had to calculate it by hand. So they've now made this group. They've also given schools percentiles.
If you just, the percentage and the unduplicated, I think that.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. So the high needs group, in the past, those other subgroups, special ed, ELL, low income, a student could certainly be in more than one subgroup. So I could be a low income student who was an English language learner. So I would be counted once in low income and once in the ELL subgroup. The high needs subgroup is unduplicated. So if you appear in one or more of those groups, you still only count for one student. Does that make sense?
And we're at 45% high needs in Attleboro.
For students who we assessed from grades 3 through 8 and 10, 45% of them were high needs, which meant they fell in one or more of those 3 categories, which is pretty high. The percentiles, they're reporting information on that to identify those bottom 20% of the schools in the state. Remember we talked about levels 1 through 5. In order for a school to be categorized at a level 3, which means they're getting extra assistance from the state, in order to be categorized in that level, they need to be in the bottom 20%. So they're giving us a number that tells us where we are in relative to that bottom 20%. They also take a look at the top 10% and see if they qualify as a commended school. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple slides. So the new formula includes CPI, so that's that gap narrowing piece, growth, which Mr. Sawyer talked about, and the student growth percentile, and the 200 indicators for the high school only. Okay. All right, this is you can imagine this, the whole packet is pretty dense, and we're trying to make it fairly simple. So the 3 top categories: ELA achievement, math achievement, and science achievement. That's our CPI, again, the numbers assigned to students and averaged out. Okay, so you don't just strictly get your average. You get 100 points if you're above whatever the target is. Remember, everybody gets their own individual targets for their subgroups. There's not one target overall. You get 75 if you've met the target, and so on. Then the 2 indicators for growth. Again, if you're above the target, you get the 100 points. If you're on target, you get the 75 points, and so on down the line. And for the graduation rate, there is a state set target and individual targets in order to reduce your or increase dropout or graduation rates for those 2. So if I'm a high school, I have all 7 of those. If I'm a middle school, I have 5 of those. I don't have the graduation and the dropouts. And for our elementary schools, we don't have the science included, but we have the other 2 for ELA and math. Okay, so you total up the points and you divide by how many indicators. So if you have 7, you divide by 7. If you have 5, you divide by 5, and so on. That gives you your annual total, and then this is where they add in this last piece. To get the cumulative piece, which is 4 years, everybody still with me? They weigh the most recent year the most. So 2012 counts for 40% of that score. 2011 counts for 30%, 2010, 20%, and 2009, 10%. And that adds up to 100 divided by 10. So it's a little difficult.
Wasn't there 2 different categories for graduation rate between 4 and 5 years?
Yes, there are 2 different targets. The 5-year would be the one that includes those students who earn their over the summer and through the year.
It's
the following year.
It's by the following year.
And to meet that, it's actually a 5% higher. So if the target this year for the 4-year graduation rate is 75%, the 5-year one is 80%.
Thank you.
So they all have little intricate pieces. We're trying to give you the big picture here. So where's Attleboro? This is the district data. Each school has 2 or 3 levels of this. We're going to give you the district view.
Bill, I'm sorry.
Just kind of going back to the last slide with the preloading kids from 2009, 10, 11, and 12. What if they weren't here for a couple of those years?
What if a
They weren't
student
scored?
wasn't here?
Yeah.
If a student wasn't here, they have to have been, in order to do the growth part, you have to have 2 prior years, unless you're in grade 4, because you only have 1 year. So if you are in another school in Massachusetts, you have a growth score. That comes to us.
Right, but if you transfer in from like another state,
Then
or if
if
you're new to the
you
country,
don't
or
have 2 previous years, you don't get a growth, and you're not included. And also, if the subgroup in one of those years wasn't big enough, you may get a rating for a subgroup maybe in 2010, and you'll see a dash for 2009. It means that that group wasn't big enough during that year to get a rating. You still, instead of dividing by 5, you might be dividing by 4 for that indicator if the subgroup wasn't there.
okay, so they are making the adjustments.
Yeah, they do the right math. It's just a little complicated how they put it all together.
What this also says, the cumulative PPI, is that you need to keep getting better. You can't simply say, we had a great year in 2011. You then got to have a great year in 2012, because 2012 is going to count more.
Right.
So it allows you to make up if you had a bad year, a good year, or what, but it should be continuous progress.
Right. There's no way to, work the system. You have to be continuously growing to cut in that gap and improving the cohort. They blend the 2 together, and they do weight the most recent year the most.
Thank you.
All right, this is Attleboro. Remember, you're not getting a separate rating for ELA and a separate rating for math. They both go together now. The only 2, remember I talked about the percentiles where they take off the bottom 20 in the state? The only 2 categories that count for these level ratings are the top 2, all students and the high need group. We get information on the rest to inform us, for example, low income, ELL, and special ed. Those inform us what part of the high needs group may be struggling. And the bottom 3 inform us of how our students' backgrounds in these groups are meeting targets or not. But the only two the state looks at for assigning our levels are the all students and the high needs subgroup. Okay. All right, so these are, this is cumulative. This is those 4 years. The target is 75. Remember, 75 points was when you were on target. All right. Anything above that means we were blending on with above. So the all needs group met its target. It's 85. The target was 75, the state set. The high needs group just missed the target. Again, it was 75 and we were 72. You take a look at the groups that make that up. Low income was slightly below, ELL was 10 points above, and the special ed group was the group that was below by quite a bit. So that gives us little information about that high needs subgroup. And then the other groups all met or surpassed the targets.
If I may just mention about the special ed group, we have formed a work group that is really a K through 12 work group, and we'll be using different resources. There's a number of things we're looking at. Number one is, of course, access to the curriculum. Kids who are not exposed to curriculum can't be expected to master it by the time they're in a testing situation. And also the model of service delivery. What is working well, particularly in the middle school areas, and the middle school team as a whole is looking at that. There are some different systems that we are trying, but really focusing on inclusive practices and what is working well. So we'll be back to report to you on that. 51 is not something that, it's not so unreachable. I mean, we're close enough, but we absolutely need that to increase and being able to deal with that.
When we break out the formula, remember the components of the formula, they are, that subgroup is actually, has no change in the CPI part, but they are below a little bit in the growth. Now, the state formula for growth doesn't take into account any kind of subgroup, puts all the kids in the state and develops these cohorts. Doesn't put, an ELL cohort or low-income cohorts. Everybody is together, and the subgroup the cohorts are set.
And I just want to say, we have some terrific data and terrific results in certain schools.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing growth that, so we know it can be done, and we're looking at those places to see what are they doing there differently than other places. So we feel very positive about the direction we're going in.
I believe we got a question from Kim before we continue.
So the top two categories were provided to us by the state, correct? And then you were able to break out, then you yourself broke out the rest? Or?
No,
they give us
all of these. The only two, and I didn't finish that, thank you. If you are level 1, you have to have met the target, these are the schools, met the target for the all student group and the high needs group. To be level 2, you miss one of those or both of those.
So we are level 2 because we made it in all, but we didn't make it in the high needs group.
In some of our schools. The
In some of
district
our schools,
itself
yes,
gets
yeah.
its rating by its lowest or its lowest level of schools. The district doesn't really get a level on its own, it gets it based on what the lowest school is.
So you'll see we have 5 level 1 schools and 4 level 2. So we're automatically a level 2.
Okay. And so then you were obviously able to determine the results that SPED Ed is the area of most need, but what I'd like to say, ELL, I think our coordinator, who's hiding in the middle there, that's obviously a testament to her.
And the teachers. Remember,
yeah.
we tripled the number of
Everyone.
people who are taking category 1 through 4 training, in addition to Sonia. But remember what I said about reinventing yourself and the practices? This district could have had a choice and said, you know what, I've never been teaching ELL, I don't think I want to do that. Attleboro teachers said, no, these are the kids in front of me, I've got to retrain myself to be able to work on that, and the same thing with special ed. So we appreciate the, so it's everybody trying to look at new practices with that.
So I'm clear on this. I see that of all our schools, we have 4 at the level 2 and 5 are at the level 1, but 3 of those 5 at level 1, 3 failed to meet the special education requirements. So only 2 of our schools are meeting the requirements across the board, which is Willett and
the high needs,
Sutter.
the high needs subgroup. We're going to get to the
Yeah, we're going to get to
We'll
that.
do that.
We'll
have
talk
a-
to the specifics.
Because I have that concern because of special education. If 3 of those 5 fail to meet that, I'd like to hear what we're working towards and how we're going to improve that.
Yeah, well, I mentioned about the work group, and I mentioned there are schools where we're seeing incredible progress, and we want to be able to replicate that, but we're gonna share that.
We're gonna summarize that today. We didn't.
Thank you.
We've sort of touched on this already, but to just go over very quickly. So the state takes this very complicated and enormous amount of data and boils it down to a very simple rating system. For each school, the state rates you level 1 through 5, where level 1 means that you have met the target of 75 or higher in both the aggregate and high needs. All right, so if you're a level 1 school, what that basically reflects is that you are meeting the goals set by the gap that you've faced in, what was it, 2011? Was that the date?
2017.
But the gap that existed in 2011, you know, they cut the gap in half, and so there are targets along the way. And if you're a level 1, then you're meeting your targets in your march towards cutting that gap in half. Level 2 is for schools that either the aggregate or the high needs subgroup or both did not meet the targets. And level 3 is when the school not only didn't meet one or both of the targets, but its performance is in the lowest 20th percentile of the state. Levels 4 and 5 require board action.
Well, I just want to add though, the first thing that the state does is takes off the bottom 20.
Which we don't want to be in.
There is a chance, and I think this may have happened this year, that you can meet both of those targets, all students in high need, and still be in level 3 if you fall in the bottom 20, which is a little hard to understand.
And that's one of the contentious things. So because you're always pushing upward, you want to be able to accelerate progress and never be in the bottom 20. But as we keep getting better, you're going to see more schools trying to push out of the bottom 20, and they may be achieved. And there's also a participation rate, too.
Right, so there's some schools right now that have a level 3 rating that met both targets, but didn't meet the participation rate. So you might be a small district that only has 30 students at a grade level, and 3 of them are out, that's 10%, and then you're automatically categorized. There's a lot of intricate pieces that we didn't give you here, but that would automatically put you in level 3, even though you met both targets.
And we don't have any issues with participation. All our students take MCAS, and we really haven't had any issues in several years.
All right, so the schools. So Attleboro as a district automatically is classified level 2 because it has 1 or more schools at level 2. If we had a level 3 district, which we don't, we would automatically had a level 3 school. We would. Hyman Fine, Hill Roberts, Studley, and Coelho are level 2. Thatcher, Willett, Brennan, Wamsutta, and the high school are level 1. And you can see from the chart, the high needs groups for Hyman Fine, Hill Roberts, Studley, and Coelho did not make their targets, and the aggregate for Hill Roberts and Coelho did not make the target. Some of them were very close. We didn't put all the targets up there. Some of them were 70 or 71. A couple of them were 68 and 69. But we still were below the 75. So they're listed as not meeting its target. We have one school, Wamsutta, which was commended for narrowing its proficiency gap, which meant it was a level 1 school in the top 10% that showed growth across the board in all 4 years. And that's a pretty difficult thing to do. And they were commended by the state for that. And what else do we have on this chart? The percentiles tell us again how close or far we are from the 20 cutoff. You can see even though Wamsutta, for example, a little confusing part, Wamsutta here is commended, yet they're listed as the 60th percentile. These are done by schools at the similar grade spans. So the elementary schools are placed together. There's a middle and elementary group, which is K-8. Then there's a middle school group, and then there's a high school group. State lines up everybody. I haven't been able to figure out the formula. They use words like relative value and progressively more weighting. They're not giving us any real information on how they're doing this. So we'll keep trying to find out, because there are some pieces in there, is why we have some level 1 schools that are, you know, lower on the percentile than some level 2 schools. It's a little confusing.
So I'm looking at this data for the high school, and what they're saying is that Attleboro High School is in the bottom third of all Massachusetts high schools.
That's what it says,
The
yes.
31%.
Yes. Now, also, you're probably going to have the high school. Remember I talked about we talked a little bit about this in our groups, if you want me to go into that. Remember we talked about some schools can make both their targets and still be in the bottom? You're probably going to get more high schools that are like that because the thresholds, at the high schools, more students are proficient and advanced. Remember, we see that happening as they go through. More of them are proficient and advanced. So they can get that higher CPI, and if they're making growth, they're making part of that, yet there are so many more of them that are doing that. So they're fit in such a tight little area. So you do have any little drop like that will happen. That may very well happen for some high schools.
The other thing I want to say, I wonder where we're compared. I was at a meeting with superintendents, and 2 of my colleagues at the same table have high schools that have 200 kids. So I'm thinking, I got 1,800 kids, and it's a 9 through 12 school, I'm being compared to that, you know, to the 200 kid high school. So we don't know, we're asking a lot of questions as to how that percentile rank is made. But that is a cause for concern. I'm not gonna, you know, because we surely, the way our achievement is growing and what we're doing there, but at the same time, we can't figure out the formula. When we do,
The part we know about the indicators is that they're meeting the achievement. They're higher achieving. They are a little bit lower on the growing. Remember that Dave talked about the 40 to 60? They're in the 40 and 44 range for ELA and math. So they're in the lower part of the growth, which, again, I don't know what part of that they're weighting, but that's one thing that we can see. They are meeting the graduation and dropout targets, and they are meeting the achievement targets. They're just not meeting that growth piece if you dig into all the reports.
Because I did notice they look pretty good except for the math and special education and ELL, so that's the only area that I could see really had the problem, so.
Yeah, we didn't like that number 31. So, I mean.
And we've been, you know.
And we're still trying to figure out how it came about. So I think the state will release more information, but it was pretty, yeah.
Their 2012 data is very strong. Is that part of the cumulative PPI? That is one of their strongest years, so we know that they are making movement.
It just concerns me because if you're looking over like the schools in the area or the schools with the same grade levels, like, you know, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, or however they structure it, when children go to apply or the students go to apply for like the colleges and that, and if they look at these scores, you're thinking, okay, you're coming from Attleboro High School, which is 31% proficient, you know.
It's not it's a part of the formula that we watch out so that we don't end up in the bottom 20. Right. But as far as the rest of the formula, the high school, like I said, for the growth part, is on the lower end of typical. The CPI is meeting targets or above targets in all 3 of them, and they are getting some extra credit. That's the part I did mention. There's some other little pieces where you get extra credit. They are getting some of that, but it is some of the subgroups that are showing on the lower end.
Okay, thank you.
So frequently, I mean, each year I do show where do schools fall across the state. You can see that what Michelle described, level 3 is the bottom 20%, and level 2 and 1 combined are about 80%. And clearly we'd love to be level 1, but we're glad we're in level 2. So you can see that if you remember, 80% last year were those schools who were in an AYP status. So it's somewhat shifted with this new system of who is in level 2, 1, and 3. Some of the things that we believe have worked and that we're continuing to study is the fact that high expectations is really the thread and was the theme of the convocation address I gave to the staff. And that high expectations is about we can do it, we should do it, and we will do it. And that doesn't just mean for children, it also means to the staff who are in front of the children and who lead the buildings. We, as I said, have reinvented a lot of the things we've done, from core literacy through math reasoning, through being able to look at stretching our kids in every parameter. It is for both adults and students. And the continuous improvement is for everyone, including our adoption and our negotiation with the new teacher evaluation system, which is bent on looking at continuous improvement and being able to address concerns and grow in your profession. In reviewing data and practices, we have gotten better at that. And not only analyzing the data, but the key part is acting on the data. How do I make my mid-course corrections and adjust my practice when I see the assessment test I gave, 40% of my kids may have gotten that problem wrong, or my children are having great difficulties in vocabulary. I also believe Attleboro, we've done a good job of matching the right interventions with the right students. When we talk about a system like vocabulary, if I was in a classroom last week in which there were 3 sentences on the board, and this was 3rd grade. The broken window made me angry. The broken window made me furious. The broken window made me annoyed. And they were talking about the nuances of when I'm annoyed versus I'm furious versus I'm angry. That's the stretching of vocabulary. Gone are the days where we say, what does angry mean? And kids say mad, and then we go on to the next word. It's how do we help our children use the context to understand the nuances of vocabulary, which is a far more complicated skill than simply asking for definitions. I mean, that's just one example about stretching kids at all grade levels, and kids with disabilities and ELL kids. The other part that I think we've done very well is that we are really trying to target our approaches for particular schools, grades, and students. So when you look at fractions, and here's an example where fractions are the foundation for so much we've done. What's the critical part the kids have to learn about fractions and the critical standard? And then what's the part that kids are laying the foundation for the future, but still need to know? And then what's the exposure part, where I learn to use basically a compass to be able to do that, you know? So it's delineating our time of what is the critical features kids have to learn about standards, what's the part that they can learn for the future, and we need to get them ready for the next grade or the next unit, and then what's the part that we want to expose them to so they're ready for the long term. I give that example because we've had a lot of success at targeting students who are on the cusp. They just have a few more points to go up from needs improvement to proficient, or a few more to get to advanced. And really, what's the push they need, or what are the mistakes they may have made that we need to do better at in helping them? And in a few weeks, you're going to be hearing about the whole school improvement plans and how we make mid-course corrections on that. And we've been very fortunate that Attleboro is looked to by the State Department to garner people here, many of them are here tonight, who attend a lot of meetings at the State Department level, who have a voice in shaping what these new standards look like, and we're on the forefront of learning about them and how to improve our practice. So all of that, coupled with many of those initiatives, has helped us what's worked. And our next steps, Mr. Sawyer will lead us into.
I'm going to jump down to the 3rd bullet. First and foremost, the next steps includes staying the course. 5 of our schools are level 1. We have met our targets, and the 4 schools that are level 2, we narrowly missed our targets. And I think this is important to realize that we continue to grow, we're continuing to show improvement, and we are doing the right kind of work, and we are going to continue to make gains. That being said, there are obvious areas of need where we need to put renewed focus and renewed energy to try to get better results. And so both at the district level and then the school level, we'll be doing improvement planning where we identify what those areas are. Obviously, special education is an important one, but there are others, and we're going to identify those needs and create plans for how we're going to get better results in the future. And these plans become very important because they set the foundation by which all the educators in the district will then set goals. Throughout the district, teams of educators will be working together to see how they can participate in these improvement planning goals set by the district and the schools, and they will also be doing it on an individual basis as well. And then the last part is, as Dr. Durkin mentioned, we have set up a special education work group, or we're planning to, and we need to focus on special education as the biggest need for the district.
Dave, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think mine's probably a question, comment, hybrid. But first, Mr. Roy, thank you very much for synthesizing all this information, and Dr. Durkin and Mr. Sawyer as well. I guess my first question is, as the state changes the model in terms of how districts and schools are assessed, is there a danger of creating misperceptions in terms of where a school is succeeding and what challenges that school might be facing? Like, for instance, the high school example was used, where we see data that indicates that there's steady progress being made, but then the formula seems to spit out a number. And so I guess one of my questions is, how do we as a district sort of prevent against misperceptions in either direction, either that a misperception that the district is performing better than it necessarily is, or that the district is underachieving when in fact it's continually improving? Like, what sort of safeguards do we have to prevent that?
Well, I think the percentile piece is separate from the piece. I think the CPI, the achievement data that they're giving us, the growth, I think is very valuable.
Right.
We use that quite a bit.
We have to meet those targets.
The growth piece gives us a lot of information because we get that on each student.
Mm-hmm.
So we can flag those students that are making low growth and ask the questions, why did that student make low growth in that year? So I think the information they're giving us now blends both of those a little bit better.
Okay.
The percentile piece for the state is really supposed to be just to take the bottom 20 off and to identify the top. In the middle is more of a broad range. But again, I can see what you're saying about being confusing with the high school being 31st and meeting its targets.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the issue becomes if you have that sort of bifurcated system where on one hand, the one slide we're doing really well, and the next slide we're ranked 31st percentile or whatever, the risk becomes there can be errant change made, I guess, and that's not the most elegant way of putting it.
But when we unpack the data they give us and go down, it actually focuses where we're going to do. So we go from this broad, ELA growth or, math growth or achievement, and we can focus in on specifically where it's breaking down.
Yeah.
So it does help us quite a bit with that. And then we get student level data too, which is even better.
And I'm glad to hear that, because I just think that whenever you start dealing with rankings and comparing districts and whatnot, you can run the risk of coming in with a chainsaw when a scalpel would do the job. And I think that was just something that sort of occurred to me. I have one more sort of specific question. We talked a lot about last year about the implementation of the new math frameworks, and maybe using the term frameworks incorrectly there, or maybe I'm using it correctly, surprisingly. Obviously that's something that the entire state is preparing for. Is there any expectation that there may be bumps in the road with regard to assessments in the coming years because of that change in delivery?
Well, I have to put my faith in the statistics people of the state, but we know that the test is changing, and we know it's getting more rigorous.
The test is changing?
The whole idea of setting those thresholds, they set the cutoffs for advanced and proficient. Part of that is supposed to be set by questions that are the same, and how students scored, if they scored more poorly or, not as well, and they're supposed to balance that off. I'm not one of those, super statisticians, but they say the transition, they should be balancing that. We're just gonna have to wait and see. It is gonna be getting more rigorous. We see that in grade 3 already. If you look at the actual items, they're more difficult and the depth that they're asking students to answer.
But the curriculum has changed correspondingly, correct?
I think they're just going to kind of blend and move us through the formula by balancing off the results on those common questions from year to year. That's how they say they do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to do it, I guess. I mean, I'm sure. I just think that every school district is put in this sort of challenging situation where, in order to maintain the high standards that the state rightfully demands, you run the risk that you can create this misperception that you're somehow not doing what should be done. And I guess that's just a fact of life that we deal with.
If I may, though, the system here, if you remember AYP, you got in and you could never get out, which was extremely distressing. Once you were hitting restructuring corrective action, it was very difficult to get out. The other piece is we have some really strong growth data in places with special education and ELL that are off the charts in that 60 above 60 range. So clearly that demonstrates that those children came in one way and where they're going, demonstrates real learning.
Right.
There are many districts who are upset because that growth data, you could have very high achieving students who come in high achieving. They're reading, they're doing all that, but their growth data is very low. So what was the point, or what did that school year and that teaching and learning environment demonstrate and add value to that child's life? So in some ways, the growth data really is a good barometer for us, to make sure that when our children are coming in, they truly are getting a rich experience that shows growth by the end of the year. So that's
some people will say when you hit the top, you hit that top on growth, but we've seen pieces where students have a 218 and a 218, yet that's in with their cohort, kids who scored like them in the past, that's considered high. Maybe some kids drop down in that group. So it's really with that cohort of kids and how they did on the next assessment.
And that's an important piece. The MCAS letters are going home this week, am I right? So families should really, it is complicated, principals will be going over that, but please do not hesitate to call us. But to look at that growth data would be an important piece for them to see. And of course, teachers will be explaining it with our parent conferences, but we hope it'll be valuable information for them.
Bill?
I'd like to thank everybody, the teachers, the coaches, the administration. Obviously there's a lot of positive things happening, but it's also very clear to me, looking at how they're scoring it and what their goals are between now and 2017, the challenges are just going to continue to escalate every year going forward. I think there's things here to be happy with, but I think there's also there's great strides ahead of us that we need to continue to make. So, thank you.
Staying the course.
Well, it looks like it's going to get harder and harder to do that going forward.
Going uphill is
the way
much
they're
harder.
scoring it. So
It absolutely is, yeah.
I guess I have a question, but first I'd like to thank everybody that's involved in the educational experience of that. But we're still showing improvement, and that sure beats the alternative. And everybody should be congratulated for that. I think my key question is, even though maybe a little complex, Massachusetts was allowed to opt out of the No Child Left Behind. Now, I thought that we would see some significant leeway in MCAS, AYPs. So, the state was granted a waiver, and I'm seeing the same criteria being used by the state to judge us. So, am I confusing something on a federal or state level, or?
Well, I think the change that's reflected in this new system is that we're putting the emphasis on those targets to improve rather than just strictly on achievement. So, looking at like Attleboro High School's data, in the old accountability regime, we got stuck in one of those traps that Dr. Durgan talked about, several years ago, and we could never get out. And so every year, even though our achievement kept growing, we kept coming back with an accountability status that was negative. And so we were high achieving school, but corrective action, In this new status, you see that Attleboro's High School's work in continuing to improve is rewarded with a level 1 status because it reflects that the new system is focused on improvement towards the final goal rather than just strictly on any one achievement level. And this goes back to, just by way of explanation, when NCLB, when No Child Left Behind was enacted, it left to the states the ability to set what, everyone had to be proficient, but states were given the power to decide what proficient looked like. And it's widely accepted as true that Massachusetts was perhaps the only state that set very, very rigorous standards for their students. Many, many states, the way to handle the requirements of No Child Left Behind set low standards. So if you have a low enough bar, then everyone's proficient and we're all winners, and that's great news. Massachusetts went the other way and said, no, we're going to have high standards. And as a result, even though Massachusetts continually scores the highest in the nation on things like the NAEP, Massachusetts participated in the international math science test called the TIMSS. We pretended like Massachusetts was a country, and we basically scored 5th in the world. So the results come back over and over again that Massachusetts has the the best education system in the country, and yet, because of No Child Left Behind, we were coming in as having, you know, what was it, 80% of the schools last year were in some sort of, had some sort of accountability status. So that clearly wasn't working because we were being punished for having high standards. So the waiver has allowed us to create a system that still lets us have high standards without punishing schools for not, you know, being there quite yet, but as long as we're making growth towards that. I don't know if that helps.
Thanks, Tim. Any other questions? Thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, the next item on the new business is a transportation update by Tom Rose, our business manager.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The purpose of the report that you'll find in your packets is to give you a draft report that I'd like to deliver to the mayor, if possible, later this week, with one primary thread, or one primary reason. And the primary reason is we need the city council to give us funding in the month of October so that we can send out our purchase orders as we'd like for the fiscal year 13. Right now, we're not able to send out all the purchase orders we'd like simply because of the fact that we know full well we're going to have a transportation deficit. So the objective is to let the city council know up front, this is what we think our deficit's going to be, and the mayor is going to use that as a tickler to say we need to advance some funds to the city, to the school department, so that they can process the procurements. The background is the spreadsheet that you'll see that's attached. That's really just simply an update to the spreadsheet that was provided to the mayor's office last month. I've also attached a couple of other documents trying to provide some information about transportation, number of students that we have that we're trying to transport, number of students that we have that are still waiting, fee for service, number of buses and so on. And then in the memo I try to provide a summary. But in summary, the bottom line is this. If we obtain dollar for dollar all the homeless transportation expenses that we incurred in FY12, and I've been told that that's going to happen through the mayor from the state, then right now our deficit's going to be about $350,000. That assumes that we put in all 29 buses, and it assumes that we keep going forward as is. Naturally, we're going to do everything we can to try to reduce that deficit as much as we possibly can, but right now that's the ballpark number. So that's a little bit about the report. Let me pause though and ask the school committee for specific questions you might have regarding the report or regarding the data. Yes.
Ken was first.
Tom, couple of questions.
Yes.
Summary, wait, when you say summary in here to thank you, that's exactly what's going to go to the mayor when you send it, right? It's not going to be word for word. That's what we're
correct.
approving. It's going to
The
go
answer, that which you have in your packet is exactly what I would be giving the mayor.
I appreciate
yes.
that. And number one, I do believe that we want. I know you mentioned above, but I do want something in there saying maybe estimating contingent on reimbursement of the homeless transportation. I know that you say that in the first summary paragraph, but I do think we want to just restate it on number one.
Okay.
Yeah, just that 320, that 352 is contingent and estimated based on the reimbursement of the homeless.
Okay, sure.
I just want to be overly crystal clear.
Good idea.
Barbara?
I see here where you say there's approximately 180 students who are not being transported.
Yes.
But would like to receive the fee for service. Do you have like an estimated time when we will know when they're going to get transportation and if we'll need another bus for those or how that's going to work?
Excellent question, Barbara. The answer is no. We should not need any extra buses.
Okay.
Right now we have 27 on the road. We have in the hopper 2 more buses.
Okay.
In all likelihood, both of those buses are going to be needed to accommodate not only the existing students that we have right now, but also these fee-for-service students. So in regard to the number of buses, I think we'll be able to get by with 29. Next week, first week in October, I'll be sitting down with our transportation department as well as sitting down with Bloom, and among the three parties, we're going to try to move as many of those 180 students as possible onto a regular bus so that these parents can finally get transportation that they've been looking for since the middle of August. So although I won't be able to give you a heck of a lot more information next week on our meeting on Monday the 15th, I'll be able to tell you how many of the 180 we've been able to move on to a bus, and these fee-for-service students now are on a regular assigned bus.
Okay, because my concern is I don't want to be having it like go into November, December, and we still have students not being able to get on a bus for fee-for-service.
Totally agree. And the reason, for the parents that are out there watching tonight, the reason why, and I know everyone here on the school committee already knows this, but the reason why I wait until October is because there are so many different changes that are made during the first 3 or 4 weeks in September. What we need is to, and we will have it, is to really get a pretty good head count on each bus. And as most of you probably know, there are 4 different runs that a bus could make because we have 4 different start times. So as we fine-tune exactly how many students we actually have on each of those 27 buses during those runs, gives us the ability to know, well, I know that for this particular bus, for this run, we have space for blank number of students. Now let's go to those addresses and see which are the likely candidates to move on that bus. And that's why we'll do it that first week in October. And it's also the reason why we really couldn't have done it the second week in September, because we didn't really have that data.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Barbara.
I think another good point to make, Tom, is it's not like we have 29 buses idling somewhere.
Oh, no.
We don't have 2 extra buses idling out in the parking lot. It's
Correct.
more the contract calls to make 29 available.
The answer, thank you, Mr. Chair. The answer is yes, and I have stressed to the Mark Bloom, who is working very, very hard with trying to get his arms around this very difficult task of transporting students, that we want to minimize the number of buses as much as we possibly can. But there's a balance, because we also want to address the fee-for-service students. So for this first month of September, what he has tried to do is manage the buses as best he can, and for that, in that regard, he has determined 27 will do it. When we go and address the fee-for-service students next week, I'm pretty darn sure we're going to need to add those 2 buses. And if we do, that'll be fine, but we want to make sure that we only add the buses if it's absolutely necessary and there's a reason for it, and that will be, those will be the drivers.
Any other questions before? Ken?
If you don't mind, I'd rather, I know this is part of finance business, but since we discussed that,
Absolutely.
just go ahead and make the motion right now. I make the motion to approve the memorandum regarding transportation status for the revisions on point 1 discussed.
Second.
You want to just take that? All right. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, none abstained. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Tom, do you have anything else you want to add in the transportation report, or is that?
No.
Okay.
Not at this point, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a personnel report. Dave Sawyer, our Assistant Superintendent.
We have 2 quick items. First, we have 1 person on the personnel report. Marisa Locke, grade 3 teacher at Thatcher, has been appointed. And we are seeking approval for the recommendation to appoint Deb Maynard as the floating district nurse.
Okay. I'll make the motion. We agree with the superintendent's recommendation to approve, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 53, that Deb Maynard be appointed a school nurse.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. A great nurse, by the way, a great nurse. She does a great job.
Can I add something that too? I wasn't
Absolutely.
able to attend the last meeting, but Lisa Gleason, who's the nurse at Thatch Elementary, she is excellent, and I am happy that my son has a nurse such at her caliber at that school. So I wasn't able to give her that last meeting, but she's excellent.
Thank you for sharing about it. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Finance, Facilities, and Procurement Subcommittee. Mr. Ken Parent.
All right, we've already moved through the motion, so I'll go right into the warrants, of which we have 3. First one dated September 12, 2012, an amount of $94,837.36, which appropriations make up $35,819.99, special funds of $43,123.49, federal and state grants of $13,397.25, encumbered federal and state funds of $1,300, and revolving funds of $1,196.63. Second warrant dated September 5th, 2012, in the amount of $120,130.26, of which appropriations make up $85,471.27. Federal and state grants of $3,511.52, encumbered state funds of $4,921.53, revolving funds of $3,272.94, and encumbered revolving of $22,953. Final one is dated September 19th, 2012, in the amount of $369,423.73. Encumbered appropriations make up $351,376.54. Special funds of $12,164.67. Federal and state grants of $2,848.83, and revolving funds of $3,033.69. Our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, October 24th at 7 p.m. And that, Mr. Chair, concludes our business.
Thank you, Ken. Moving on to Curriculum Instruction Subcommittee. Mr. O'Neill.
Our next meeting will be held on the 16th of October, 6:30.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Okay, moving on to Policy Subcommittee. Ms. Furtado did inform me last night that she would not be attending today, so Policy Subcommittee member Barbara Crow will be reading the minutes for the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Policy Subcommittee had a meeting on September 17th, and we have one policy to bring forward this evening. It's Policy CBD, Superintendent's Contract. Now, this policy was sent to the subcommittee because it was not clear or defined. There were 2 different interpretations or opinions on how this policy read, and the policy needed to be clarified. The subcommittee now feels that all concerns have been addressed with the changes that were made to the policy language, and the policy now clearly states the process. Is there any discussion or comments? Yes, Mr. Murphy.
Just that there was discussion, as you said, about the clarity of this process. The policy in question is with regard to the superintendent's contract. Policy CBD contemplates a 3-step process by which a contract would be finalized between the school committee and the superintendent. The amendment to the policy tonight does not change that 3-step process. It clarifies the language in the policy. And the 3-step process, just to review, 1, the whole committee sets the parameters under which the contract is negotiated. Step 2, the executive board of the school committee, consisting of the chairperson, the vice chairperson, and the secretary, negotiates that contract with the superintendent or superintendent candidate under the parameters set by the full committee. Step 3 is the negotiated contract is presented to the full committee for approval. The rationale behind the policy is that you're more likely to get an approval by the whole committee if the whole committee is the body that set the parameters. Some sub-body of the whole committee needs to actually execute the negotiations, and this policy vests that with the executive board. It's the exact same process that we have followed at least since 2004, according to the scratched out date. And this essentially just makes the language throughout this policy consistent so that there's hopefully less confusion.
Okay, Okay, and I can respect your opinion on that, but that's what was one of the interpretations, because the other interpretation of this policy and others' opinions were that what it had stated before is it wasn't clear as if the officers of the committee would go back to the superintendent and then bring the information back to the committee because the language wasn't clear. So there was a reason for it being brought down to the subcommittee level, and like I said, because everyone had their different interpretations or opinions, respectfully, that's why it needed to be clarified.
May
Certainly.
I can't speak to what the level of confusion was prior to the amendments that are being suggested tonight, but am I correct in saying that there is no disagreement with regard to the process that I just articulated?
I think the reason it went down to subcommittee, we had differences of opinion, that some people felt that the way it wasn't clarified enough, that it's the way it was written, that the officers of the committee were to negotiate and bring that information back to the full committee. And I think this now clarifies that the full committee will give the parameters, and the executive committee will go in and negotiate and then bring that back. Where we had that issue prior, there was a discussion where some people thought that the officers of the executive committee would go in and discuss that and bring it back to the committee. But we're saying now that the full committee will set the parameters, and then the executive committee will go in and negotiate that and bring it back. Because those were the different opinions. Like I said, not everyone was on the same page with their opinion of how this read.
Can I respond? Yeah, again, I can't speak to the level of confusion prior to these amendments or how that confusion could have been drawn from the policy, but I believe we are in agreement as to at a minimum, the modified policy being put forth tonight contemplates a 3-step process. Step 1, parameters set by the full committee. Step 2, negotiations conducted by the executive board of the committee. Step 3, negotiated contract presented to the full committee for approval. Is that correct?
Yes, I think the language now defines that it's clear. Because, again, my opinion wasn't clear to me in the beginning. So I believe now it's clearly stated. Okay. Is there any other discussion or comments? Okay, seeing there is no other discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any?
I'm not sure if it was ever, I'm not sure if the motion was ever made and seconded.
I'll make a motion to adopt policy CBD as amended.
Second.
Okay. Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Judy, policy passes. Please update everyone with the new policy. And our next policy meeting will be held on October 22nd at 7 p.m. in this room. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Barbara. Motion for a 10-minute recess.
Second.
We'll take this. Call this meeting of the Attleboro School Committee back to order. Okay, why we're here tonight? First, I would like to read a letter that I forwarded to all school committee members, dated September 21st, 2012. Dear school committee members, as each of you know, this is the final year of Dr. Pia Durkin's contract as the superintendent of schools for the Attleboro School District. Dr. Durkin has publicly stated her expectations that this will be her final year as our superintendent, and is therefore incumbent upon the school committee to plan for the transition of leadership that will take place. I have asked Mr. Ken Parent, Mr. Dave Murphy, to prepare a presentation on a proposed search process that will allow for a thorough and professional search for the next leader of the Attleboro school system. Ken and Dave will be presenting this proposal on Monday night. As you will see, the process emphasizes the importance of full school committee member involvement and community participation. There will be an important role for every member to play in the course of this search. In addition to this presentation, we'll be holding a public meeting with the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, Glenn Kuchar, on Tuesday, September 25th, 2012 at 7 p.m. And that, I'm going to open this presentation on the superintendent search proposal to Mr. Dave Murphy and to Mr. Ken Parent. Mr. Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Mr. Parent, we thank you for this opportunity to make this presentation, and to all committee members and staff members who are taking the time to listen to this presentation. As the chairman stated, this school committee will be charged with executing the transition of leadership that will take place in the school system over the course of the next year. As we go through the slides, and we'll try to keep this brief, as this is coming at the end of the meeting, but it's important that we have the opportunity to hear from fellow members' comments and questions and whatnot. The authority to hire the superintendent is vested in the school committee via Massachusetts law and school committee policy. That's true for all school districts across Massachusetts. It's one of the three defined authorities given to each school committee. It is, I think it's fair to say, the most important and influential decision a school committee can make in the course of its term, and we are presenting a process that I think speaks to that importance. The three words that I hope you will associate with this presentation, and at the conclusion of the search that the community will associate with the search process, is professional, inclusive, and successful. And Mr. Parent and I will be talking a little bit about what exactly that will mean. One thing that's important to remember, superintendent transitions take place under different circumstances. Generally speaking, those circumstances dictate the way in which the transition is executed. Just in the past 15, maybe a little bit more than that, I haven't done the math, since the late 90s, Attleboro has undergone 4 superintendent transitions, each one with its own characteristics, and the school committees in office at that time executed those searches according to those circumstances. Dr. Rappa was a long-term superintendent with a long-term assistant superintendent who took over, and Mr. Thibodeau served for 18 months without a very public search process. At the conclusion of those 18 months, a full search was engaged in by the then school committee, which resulting in the appointment of Dr. Pacey. Dr. Pacey served for 4 years, and then in a transition similar to the one that led to Mr. Thibodeau's appointment, Mr. Lovering took over for the final 3 years of his career, a long career with the Attleboro School District. 7 years ago, a extensive and public search process was engaged in, and that is those are the types of circumstances that we find ourselves in now, and that is why this will be a thorough and inclusive search that the school committee will be engaged in. Quickly, why is that important? Because transitions, although they take place in under different circumstances, are generally rare, and we are in a position now where we are undergoing our first superintendent search in what will be 7 years. It is therefore incumbent upon this school committee to, in addition to finding the right person to lead the Attleboro School District, to take advantage of this opportunity to sort of take stock as to where we are as a school district, where we're going in the next 5 years, and of course what attributes will be important in the next superintendent and the next leader of our school system. Before I turn the presentation over to Mr. Parent, we'll talk briefly about the goals of the superintendent search process. The first goal of any hiring process, obviously, is to hire the right person. You'll note that the term "the right person" is in quotation marks. The reason for that is at this point, this early in the process, we do not know who the right person is. That's the point of the search process, to identify what characteristics we need in our next leader and how we will go about finding that person. The second goal, as I said, and this will be stressed tonight and throughout the search process, is for this search to be conducted in a professional, inclusive, and successful way. And when I use the term inclusive, I want to be clear that you should be associating the broadest definition of the word inclusive that you can envision. Inclusive means inclusive of the community at large, inclusive of our hardworking staff throughout the Attleboro School District, and certainly inclusive amongst the 9 individuals elected to make this determination. The 3 sub-questions, and I know I touched upon them briefly, that the search will endeavor to answer: what is working well in the Attleboro School District? What challenges are facing the Attleboro School District over the next 5 years, or the coming years? You can pick a number there, but generally speaking, I think we certainly want to anticipate the challenges that the school district will face in the next 5 years. And what attributes are necessary for the next superintendent to be successful in the Attleboro School District? There will be a lot of opinions on that, and there will be an opportunity for anyone and everyone who has an opinion to voice that. How do we go about doing that? And again, we see our goals there of professional, inclusive, and successful. The proposal being made tonight is for a 4-phase process. Mr. Parent is going to run through those 4 phases, and we'll sort of dig into each one of them. But what I will say is that each phase of this process will have its own identifiable goals. And each of those goals will go back to our 3 big picture goals, which are to find the right person, to conduct the search in a professional, inclusive, and successful manner, and to answer the questions as to where we are as a district and where we are headed. And we'll be doing that by executing the search that Mr. Parent is now going to run through with us. And obviously, we look forward to your questions. So with that, the gentleman from Ward 6, Mr. Parent. I can hold on.
Oh, okay, sure. All right, so as you can see from this slide, we have 4 phases to our plan. Phase 1 being the research and reporting, Phase 2 being the draft of the job specification advertising, and Phase 3, assembly finalist stage, and Phase 4, the final stage. All is to accomplish the goal of hiring the right person. Let's start off with Phase 1. I'll take you through the research and reporting. Now, it's been devised for the committee's approval that we go through 4 gathering stages. First would be the parent-family survey, and I'll go into a little bit more on the following slides on each. The questionnaire, focus groups, and statistical reporting. The parent-family survey, that's going to be looking for the sentiment of pretty much the community, parents, teachers, everyone who's involved in the Attleboro school system. Our goal, I believe, is to get it online, and if people prefer, there will be hard copies available. The second phase of the gathering of information is going to be the questionnaire. The questionnaires' goal is to almost pull in information when that's geared towards selected groups, and we'll pull information on that we're going to use and bring to our focus groups. It's going to kind of set up the framework to run effective focus groups. The focus groups will be, if you, why don't we flip to the next slide? The focus groups actually include a very, very large amount. You know, we have big goals, and we want to hope to get in a lot of focus groups. What we want to do with them is have all the committee members, or well, not everyone, but have committee members go and engage with these different groups. These are some of the samplings that we've come up with, and we could always add more if people feel there's more. We want to take the questionnaires, set up a framework, go to these focus groups, and from that point, get to our last part of Phase 1, which is putting together a comprehensive assessment. Now, the comprehensive assessment is going to take all our questionnaires, take all our surveys, take all the focus groups, gather all that information, and basically come down to 3 questions. What's working well in Attleboro? I guess the other side of that would be what's not working well in Attleboro. What challenges are we facing in Attleboro? from what parents see in the schools, from what we've learned in our meetings here. We should be able to put a nice framework of what we need to focus on when we look at a superintendent and where his or her expertise may lie. And finally, what do we want in the next superintendent? What kind of characteristics do we want? What kind of background do we want? What kind of specialties do we want?
Mr. Parent, could I just jump in
Yep,
really
good.
quick? Just to go back to that previous slide on phase one, you can see that each school is represented with a minimum of 2 focus groups, one that focuses on building staff and one the families that inhabit that school. And what I would say is that if you're watching right now and you are part of a group or you have views yourself as to what is important in the next superintendent in the next 5 years for the Attleboro School District, and you are not represented on this slide, which would be tough because it says general public, but nevertheless, if you are a part of a constituency that is not included, we need you to let us know, and we will have a focus group for you. The goal is for this search to incorporate more public engagement than any search preceding it. And the slide is there because we're certainly going to have these focus groups, and not everyone necessarily represents one focus group. If we have a school with thousands of students, we'll most likely be having a couple of focus groups or finding a way to break that down so that we can run them effectively. But the point is, if you have something to say, we want to hear it. Thank you, Mr. Parent.
Yep. So then we go into phase 2. Now we've gathered all the information. We'll probably all have many hours of reading, many hours of analyzing. After we've all kind of sat through the information ourselves, we're going to get together in a working session. This is going to be made up of both the school committee and other members of the administration and community. And we're going to sit down and we're going to have a working session, basically determine what we're going to post out there for our job description. Our goal is going to be to come up with the job specification so that we can put in an advertisement. And all dates are tentative when we talk about this, but our goal is to publicly post the position by December 15th. So basically, our duty is to get together, come up with the prerequisites, come up with the credentials that we want for our proposed candidates. We move on to phase 3, which will be the semifinalist stage. That's going to be basically when we get in resumes and applications. We're going to have to sit down and come up with who we need to interview and who we're going to bring to the full committee. Our goal is to get to 3 to 5 candidates. We want to present 3 to 5 candidates to the full committee. So after the full committee hears from each of these candidates, they can determine who they like best. Now, it's more than just interviewing. Once you come up with a finalist, there's going to be representatives of the school committees who are going to visit their districts. The finalists are going to come to us. And finally, it'll have to be a public interview. The interviews are public for them. And the school committees will have to vote on which candidate we feel is best. And that's a very general, quick 8 months, but that's, I guess, it phased down into a quick form.
If I could, so we look here at the timetable, and as Mr. Parent said, and as we will say repeatedly tonight and throughout this process, all dates are tentative and subject to change. And we really can't stress that part out enough. Certainly, this is an extremely important job that we are recruiting for. We want to give ourselves as much time as possible, and looking toward the sort of second half of the process, we want to prepare for as much of a transition period as we can. That being said, posting for the superintendent is unlike posting for any other position throughout the school district, because whereas the other positions that we post for, and that's every position throughout the school district, administrator, teacher, paraprofessional, those jobs are to help contribute to the vision of the school district. The superintendent ultimately is the individual responsible for both articulating that vision and in a lot of ways setting that vision. And so as a result, we are not prepared to post for the position until we've done the work that is necessary to make a determination as to where we are in our history as a school district and where we're going in the coming years. And that's why all of the work that goes up to the posting, which again we hope is by December 15th, is so critical. So again, keeping in mind that all dates are tentative and subject to change, the timeline that we are looking at this point, starting tonight, is a phase 1 that we would like to have off the ground by October 15th. Mr. Parent alluded to some of the logistical components of that. What I can say is accessibility will be a critical piece of phase 1. If logistically, certainly we want to have an internet component to the surveying. We will also have a hard copy component so that we can try to capture as wide a universe of respondents as possible. That's probably a 5 to 6 week process. It includes the surveying, the questionnaires, and the focus groups. By December 1st, it is our hope that all that information will be synthesized and put together in a comprehensive assessment of the district, including the attributes that the community is looking for in our next leader, and that will be circulated to the school committee and the public. That will lead to the working session that Mr. Parent spoke about in early December. The working session will be the opportunity for the school committee to set the parameters and the job specification, to draft the job specification of the superintendent, which will lead to the advertisement and the posting of that position. Again, hopefully keeping in mind that all dates are tentative and subject to change around December 15th. Then the posting period, we will, I have no doubt, receive a highly talented applicant pool, which will lead us to phase 3, which will be the phase that I think people are generally more familiar with, the interview committee that will be comprised of school committee representatives and representatives from the school district and from the community. That group will be charged with, as Mr. Parent said, forwarding, and it will be our hope by around the middle of March, March 15th, a list of 3 to 5 candidates who will be finalists, and they will be presented to the school committee, who we will have approximately a month to work through the stage 4 process, phase 4 process that Mr. Parent walked us through, them visiting us visiting them, and the public interview. A few important reminders, and these are extremely important reminders for everyone to keep in mind. We have a superintendent. We have one superintendent at a time, and our superintendent is Pia Durkin. Dr. Durkin enjoys all of the responsibility and authority of that office. There's no ambiguity about that. There's no confusion about that, and there won't be. The school committee will be, and through the school committee, the public will be updated on this process on a monthly basis. We will make sure that committee members and the public are fully informed as we move along from one stage to another, and in the event we run into some bumps in the road, the school committee and the public will know about that as well. In conclusion, I will again reiterate the characteristics that it is our hope will be associated with this search at the conclusion of the search. This will be a professional search. It will be conducted with the utmost professionalism. It will be an inclusive search, and it will be, and by inclusive, again, I mean the broadest definition of inclusive that you can imagine, and ultimately it will be a successful search. And I think those of us who have worked on this presentation and consulting various other individuals as we develop this, including the School Committee Association, we are confident that this will be a successful search. And I would say one other note about this. As I said, different transitions take place under different circumstances, and they look different, and they involve different components. There's no question that this is an ambitious process that we are proposing. There's a lot of work, there are a lot of moving pieces, there are a lot of components. What I would say to anyone that is concerned about its ambition, for lack of a better term, or its complexity, is that we are an ambitious school district. It's one of our defining characteristics. It was clear throughout the presentation of the student performances that we heard earlier tonight, and it will be clear throughout this process, and it will be clear for anyone applying for this job that one of the defining characteristics of Attleboro is we are an ambitious school district, and anything less than the most thorough and professional And frankly, the best search process will not be good enough for this school district, and that will be something that I know all school committee members will keep in mind as we move through the next few weeks and months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, and thank you, Mr. Parent. I mean, we can't kid ourselves. This is the most important thing we can do as a school committee, and possibly as a school district as a whole. How we got here on this proposal, just so the committee is aware, is this proposal was made up using two different documents. There was a document used in the 2005, 2006 search process, and also framework provided to us by the MASC on superintendent searches that they have previously performed. So again, it's a big process, and I thank Mr. Murphy again and Mr. Parent for being recruited and accepting that proposal. But again, the expectations for this is to be a 9-month process. That is what we've been told by the MASC, as well as other communities, how long this process usually takes. Well, we are at the end of September. We do want to fill this position by July 1st, so we're at the 9-month stage. That's why I'm going to put a motion out for this committee to approve the superintendent proposal that has been put out in front of you. And agree, I think it's been said 2 or 3 times by the presenters, that everything can be changed, okay, to meet committee needs or to meet a deadline need. But we do have to start somewhere. We have to start now. So I'd like to put the motion out there to approve the superintendent's search proposal as presented tonight and the timeline. But that will allow us 2 things. And I think the most important thing is to get this information onto the school website and start the process of talking to individuals out in the community to start getting these focus groups going. I know we do have some questions, so Mr. O'Neill.
I was just going to second.
Okay.
Second. Yeah, I second.
Okay, we have a second on the motion. Now, do we have any discussion on the motion? Ken?
I think it's impossible to understress how important this is. I ask that everyone in the school system, all the teachers, all the administration, really help us, because it's not the school committees on the front lines every day. It's the students, it's the teachers, it's the administration. And the goal here is to be a one cohesive working group, and if we could do that, I think we can really take Attleboro to continued success.
Great point, Ken. Dave?
I would just echo Mr. Parent's comments and say that ultimately, by virtue of the law, there are 9 individuals who will vote on the next superintendent of schools. That's our responsibility, whether we like it or not. It will be impossible for us to make a good determination or an informed determination without the level of cooperation that Mr. Parent just spoke of. And I can say that going into the process, I'm fully confident and very comfortable that this is going to be a good process. It's going to be one that everyone's going to have a seat at the table, and I think we all look forward to having that opportunity to sit with them. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Ken and Dave for the work putting this together. It's a lot of work to come up, prepare this kind of search process. I also wanted to say that getting focus groups together and all that kind of stuff is really going to require us all to hit the ground running as soon as possible. So I hope that we can all, gather together and make sure that we can sort of divide and conquer the district as a whole. Getting focus groups together, divided out by our wards and schools and where our interests lie. So I think it's going to be a lot of work. I think it's going to be a lot of great work, though. And you've laid out a very inclusive process, and hopefully the city responds to that.
Thank you, Chris. Bill?
Yeah. Echoing what Chris just said, I agree to thank the 3 of you for putting this together. We do have our challenges ahead of us, and it's, like you said, it's the most important thing that we are charged with doing. So.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Any more discussion? Ms. Cito?
I had been on the search committee for the previous superintendent. And it's an interesting process. involve quite a bit of work. But it's necessary. We owe it to the kids.
Yes, you know, I think if we stay forward with this process, the way it's been written, using the values that was presented with us tonight, it'll provide Attleboro with what they expect to get. We owe it to ourselves as into our community to make sure this is done the best way going forward. To bring the best candidates to Attleboro is the objective. If we fall short of that, then we have not fulfilled our obligations as a committee. So that's, again, I'm going to take a roll call vote on this. Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler, yes. Mr. Parent?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Ms. Zito?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. 6-0, I'm sorry. Again, I thank everybody for taking their time tonight to listen to this proposal. And again, there will be a presentation tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in this room by Glenn Kusher, who's the president of the Mass Association of School Committees, especially now that we have a prospective timeline and proposal, and we want Glenn, to look at it and offer any advice that we can on it. And as we know, the MASC provides plenty of free services to this community moving forward on this superintendent search that we fully intend to utilize. So again, I thank you all for coming here tonight and make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.